Welcome to the Business of Race podcast, where we examine issues of race and racism, the impacts they have on business, and what employers can do to address those issues effectively to create a better working environment for everyone. I'm your host, Regina Newkirk-Rucci, the Director of Equity for 90 Forward, a racial equity and justice nonprofit based in Jacksonville, Florida. And today I am so excited to have joining me in the conference room, Rebecca Watson, who is the CEO of Limitless Leaders Incorporated. Welcome to the conference room, Rebecca.
Thank you, Regina. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that we just get right down to business. And so the agenda topic today is why employees of color need mentors and sponsors.
Yeah.
Right. But before we get to sort of building people, the pipeline within, let's talk about some of these challenges I hear all the time, because people say, we don't know where to recruit diverse talent. There really isn't enough. There aren't enough people in the pipeline. The pool just isn't there. There aren't people for the job. I think even in light of some of these things that have come up with the NFL and Wells Fargo, some of these people like that have been bigger news stories, that is an argument I still hear a lot. And so, but I feel like that's not really the issue that people have. So what are some of the challenges that organizations have in recruiting diverse talent? And what are some things that they could do to improve that process?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is just this notion about where you're casting your net. So I graduated from an HBCU. There's lots of data around the production power of HBCUs in terms of output for Black folks with PhDs, who are pursuing high-level careers and are really highly qualified. And so Rhodes Scholars, you name it. So if I'm listening to an organization who is articulating that same pain point, my first question is, where are you casting your net? Mm-hmm. Because every HBCU, and this is just a small example, every HBCU has an alumni association of some sort. There are also regional associations for African American focused civic groups or organizations. So if you are of the mind that where I cast my net matters, then you're less likely to say, well, I put it out on LinkedIn, I shout it out on Indeed, I put it on Glassdoor, and we didn't get very many hits. And you become more intentional and say, let me talk to these Black sororities and fraternities, these chapters that are in my city, wherever my organization is, and start to connect with them, build relationships, because they may know, right? They may have members right there or know of others who may be interested. Could I leverage that relationship and their communication channels to get connected? The other thing that I would say, and this one is, a little more dicey, is I've never heard people of color voicing the same issue, right? Of finding non-people of color to recruit for their organization. So what that says to me is that there's a divide, potentially a divide or a disconnect in our personal networks as well, right? So we talk professionally, there's a way to kind of move and recruit and cast your net in the right places and connect with the right organizations and whatnot. But the degree to which we're intentional about developing personal relationships with folks who don't look like us, who don't believe what we believe, who don't walk our walk, so to speak, in life, good people know good people, period, point blank, end of the story. Mm-hmm. So if my personal network is now becoming more diverse because I'm being intentional about that, I've got very real relationships that I can leverage for the benefit of my own personal development, growth, whatever, learning, but also in this case of, hey, do you know anybody? Do you know any organizations? Like, where else can I be looking?
Right.
Right. And you've got your personal board of directors that can be advising you. But I've not yet seen in mass this acceptance of the importance of having as diverse a personal network as we might think we need for our professional network. Does that make sense?
It does. And especially as you talk about, all of these things are fundamentally built on relationships. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I can get an applicant that's coming in through Glassdoor or coming in through LinkedIn. But if my colleague told me that I needed to talk to so-and-so, that carries more weight from the beginning. Before I even see the resume, the fact that this is a person who knows me, knows the job, and knows this other person and is recommending them, that's always going to be, I'm going to consider that more heavily. And I think that's
right.
The inclination of most people. Yeah. And so if my personal network is built of people who are just like me, and their personal network is built of people who are just like them, then that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a whole lot of people like me, and I'm not going to get that diversity that is really going to strengthen the organization. So I think that's a really important point, that not only do you need to be intentional in where you're casting your net professionally and where you're advertising the jobs, and where you are recruiting for positions, but also really looking at your own personal network. How diverse is your own personal network of people? Who can you pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I've got this position open, and they are going to have some different minded, different experience, different lived backgrounds of people
that's right.
to refer to you.
Yeah.
So I think that's extremely important, and I think something that doesn't really get talked about that much.
No, because that's, it's personal.
Right.
Right. And we like to keep those things separate, but it really does get to the core of beliefs and mindsets and habits around just what we believe is important, and who we believe is important to be connected to. And the reality is, I work a lot with leaders, and I always say leadership is personal, right? Because people are leaders, and leaders lead people, right? So all of this is very personal. So what I think is a missed opportunity is the conversation about, if I'm struggling to have this conversation or talk about this or consider this diversifying of my personal network, how's that actually showing up in my leadership on the job? And how is it impacting the environment that I'm creating for the diverse talent that I actually want to attract? Because that could be the third reason why recruitment issues may be showing up. Folks may already know, I'm not sure if this, place will welcome me or support me or, create an environment where I believe I can flourish. Doesn't mean that the environment is bad, but folks have to believe that it's an environment that they can flourish. They have to believe that.
And I think that gets to the point, right, of authenticity.
Yeah.
And people are far more likely to consider what is authentic in what you do as opposed to what you say.
That's right.
Right. And as you were talking, it made me think of a boss that I had that he said all of the right things as far as diversity, and that he really wanted to have this diverse team, and and he believed in these multicultural approaches, etc. And then I went to a party at his house, and I was the only person of color there. Right? You really believe it? So now I'm questioning the authenticity. Or are you just saying the things that sound good and aren't really true? And so if it doesn't show up in all aspects of your life, is it actually authentic? I think that's a really important question to answer. Like anybody who knows me knows that I am a natural talker. That's my thing, right? Right?
Same.
And it doesn't matter what environment I'm in, I'm a natural talker. And so if I were suddenly, oh, well, I'm in this group of people now, I don't say anything. Are you really a talker? Are you really?
Or maybe you are, but there's something about that environment that creates hesitation for you, whether it's perceived or actually real, right? So, go ahead.
And then that's a situation where the environment is preventing me from being my authentic self, which then means you're not getting the best of me.
Right. Or my perception of the environment. Because a lot of times it is just that, right? But I think you're right about that authenticity, and now more than ever with the emotional, the spiritual, the mental weight of what we as a global community just walked through over the last few years, we actually have less capacity to not be authentic. You know what I mean? Because like we carrying too much or trying to deal with too much. Like we have to be ourselves, or we've gotten to a point where we've realized not being myself is exhausting. And I just did 2 years of mega exhaustion. I can't go back to inauthenticity.
Right.
Yeah.
And even though, I mean, that's one of those things I think is one of the reasons behind the Great Resignation, right? I am tired of not being who I truly am. I don't want to be in a place that doesn't align with my values and beliefs. And I think a lot of employers are really struggling with that because that was never on the table before. At least they didn't believe it was, and certainly not to the degree that it is now.
Yeah.
Right. So, because before, as long as I had this statement over here, right, and it was on the website, and I didn't have any lawsuits, I'm good. Now you've got employees demanding that it's in all of the things you do. You can't have these sort of contradictions in behavior, right? Which I think really is a great segue to the next point, because I know a lot of organizations hire diverse employees. But when I start looking at promotion, particularly to the leadership level and the decision-making level, I do not see that same level of diversity.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, that's true for most organizations.
Yeah.
And so as we sort of talk about, there's how do you get more diverse people in the door? But then how do you get more diverse people through the ranks of leadership in your organization? There's lots of things you can do. And I do want to hit on some of those other things too, but we've got mentorship and sponsorship. And I think we hear about mentorship. We don't really hear about sponsorship. And B, I don't know that either one of them are valued to the degree of importance that they should be.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was actually just having lunch with a friend a couple of days ago. And she's a younger professional woman, entrepreneur, just kind of starting out. And, so we're catching up. How are things going? How's your business? What are you learning? What do you need? That kind of thing. And as I listened to her, sort of articulate great things that she was doing, really smart moves that she was making around connecting with people that she knew who were already in her industry so that she could learn from them. Family members who are doing the same work. I looked at her square in the face and I said, you need a mentor. And we entered into this conversation about mentorship. And one of the things that I said to her was, one of the things that a mentor provides that someone who loves you and is giving advice doesn't is consistent direction and guidance that enables accelerated growth. Right? And they also provide a model for you. So you can talk to me about it, you can show it to me, but I can also watch you do it. And those combined make for a really powerful professional, personal growth experience that then serves to build capacity necessary to be ready for these next levels of leadership. Because readiness is also important. It's not just about getting the door open. If you're not ready to do the job, I don't care who you are.
Right.
You shouldn't be in that seat.
Right.
You know
And it
what
can
I mean?
actually be more detrimental if you come in, you don't do the job well.
That's exactly right.
This doesn't work.
It's not okay.
Right.
So I think a lot of times, I remember having a conversation with someone once, and we were talking about diverse talent and leadership, and they asked the question, well, what about quality? It was almost as if there was an assumption that if I'm going to hire a non-white candidate, then I may have to sacrifice quality in order to meet that objective. And I shared with her, she was a friend, I shared with her, I said, hey, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
And the power of mentorship in that space, right, is to help ensure that whatever those skills are, strategies, whatever those habits are, ways of being, whatever that wisdom is, whatever those patterns of thought are that are going to put you on a trajectory to be able to effectively lead yourself first and then others in service of a larger mission or organizational vision. Somebody's got to help you cultivate that.
Right.
Yeah. And somebody's got to be invested continually in you, because that's not a short-term trip. Yeah.
And I think, because I've had the great fortune of having some really amazing mentors.
Same.
And having some people who have been there before, who can see pitfalls you don't even know exist, because the landscape changes the higher up you go in an organization,
100%.
right? And I think that's also a misnomer, right? We think about a lot of this in terms of the job, right? So I need to be able to do this work, and then I'll be able to do this work, and then I'll be able to do this work. But what you're dealing with around the work changes as you go up.
Yes, it does.
Because while I understood there were politics, I didn't understand the political acumen I needed to have.
That's right. I didn't even know there was a such thing as having a political frame and being able to operate effectively in it.
And it didn't have anything to do with the job. But it
this
does.
is not on the job description.
It's not on
what
the
are we
job
talking
description.
about?
There are so many things that are not on the job
That's right.
description. The higher up you go, you got to have somebody who really understands that and knows how these things operate within that context.
Yeah, it's the holder of the wisdom and the cheat codes, is how I like to say it, right? Your mentor is the holder of the cheat codes. And it is essential. And what I love about what you're saying, Regina, is that that's important, and that in and of itself may not get the whole job done, right? So you talked about this sponsorship piece too, and it's just making me think about the importance. A mentor can, sponsor you, can say things, advocate for you and whatnot, but having another voice that's just the one that, as I like to say, continually putting you on in spaces, like saying my name when I'm not in the room. I can't tell you the number of contracts, business referrals, jobs that I have been very blessed to receive as a result of people sponsoring me. And in many cases, it wasn't a intentional conversation. Hey, will you be my sponsor? If something comes up, can you kind of put my name in the ring? Or, if that opportunity comes. But it really was, going back to what we talked about, it really was about building a relationship, right? sincerely, not for some kind of business game, but legit building a relationship with the person and being willing to share myself. Here's what I love. Here's what I'm passionate about. Here's what I do. Come see me do what I do. Let me bring some of what I do to what you're doing to help you, right? So you enter this space of service, which is what leadership really is anyway, right? And when you traffic in this space of service, you're always looking for seeds to sow. Period, point blank, end of story, right? For the benefit of others, greater good, whatever. So you're sowing seeds. Well, I mean, I'm not a farmer, but I know when you put some seeds in the ground and some dirt on them, a little water and sunshine, magic happens, right? So stuff starts to spring up. And you may move on and be planting seeds elsewhere, but whoever was there with you when you planted those seeds at the time is now picking up that fruit and showing others. Look at the fruit that Rebecca, produced. Taste the fruit. Isn't this good? You should go talk to her. She's got more fruit like this, right? And so these sponsors become just as valuable as mentors, because I'm over here with my mentor learning more things about how to be successful, how to accelerate my growth, what to do, what not to do, while my sponsors are gathering fruit from seeds that I've sown and literally sharing it with people.
And I think timing is so important in this conversation, right? Because I can not fully have my act together with a mentor, right?
You probably won't.
You probably won't have your act fully together with a mentor, because the mentor is giving you guidance to get your act together.
That's right.
Right?
That is right.
But here's the thing. You said you would have the fruit. You need to make sure that you've got tasty fruit that is going to grow, that people want and is appetizing.
100%.
When you talk about getting a sponsor, and I think this is something, again, we don't talk about sponsorship enough. It's so important. You need people out there who are your hype man, who are doing the PR work for you. But you have to make sure that what they are promoting is quality.
100%.
Because if it is not only will you lose the opportunity, but that person will also lose the opportunity to be a sponsor for somebody else, right? I can't, if I say, oh, Rebecca, you really, really need to talk to Abby. She's phenomenal. You're going to love her. She's going to do some amazing things for you. And you come and you talk to Abby and you hire her for some work, or you consider her for promotion, and she's missing appointments. She's not getting quality work in. The writing is poor. Whatever the case is, you're not going to trust me the next time.
That's right.
I talk to you about a sponsor. So I think sometimes we also want to rush in, right? Because it's, I think about my nieces who are in their 20s, right? They believe they should be president of the company tomorrow. And so I think sometimes we want to rush in like, oh, well, let me go on and get a mentor and a sponsor. And like, wait, make sure you get these in the right order, because you want that mentorship first, because again, you talked about readiness, right? You want to be ready for the next level. And you need to make sure you have a solid understanding of what the next level is, how you need to get there, and you've done the prep work.
That's right.
To succeed at the next level.
Yeah, I would say when your desire to be better outweighs your desire for promotion comes a lot faster. Way faster. And easier.
Right.
Because you're actually investing your energy in the right thing. Doesn't mean you don't have aspirations to grow and ascend or whatever. But like if your main focus is I'm trying to go to the next level, go to the next level, go to the next level, then you lose that moment in between, which is growing to the next level, as you named it. Right. And I have seen folks get to places of leadership that they just weren't ready for, and it's a tough road to walk for the leader, and for everyone connected to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely is. And it can be a lot of the things that aren't on the job description
100%.
that make you not ready for it. And that's where, again, I think that having that mentor, somebody who's going to be able to inform you of those things and really being open to it. Because if you're so focused on the promotion, you're like, oh, no, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. As opposed to, what does that mean? How does that impact the daily? You're saying that this is likely to happen, or this could happen. How do I get ready for that? Really, again, looking at that growth opportunity for the learning so that you are actually ready for the promotion, not just because you want it, but because you have the skills and the experience and the understanding to back it up.
Yeah, and I think mentors actually play a role in this too, right? Because they've got a perspective about what my now and my potential next may look like. Mm-hmm. They also know their own walk and what they can bring to my development, to my current experience to help me grow. And I used to do a lot of mentoring and coaching specifically for women in leadership, women of color in leadership. And one of the things that I would say is, let's have a conversation, because I've got to figure out two things. One, if I can actually help you. Mm-hmm. Okay, because just because I've been in the game for a minute doesn't mean I have what you need right now to help you move forward. So we can't just assume that longevity equals good match. Right. Because it doesn't all the time. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I'm trying to figure out is, are you actually ready to receive help on this level? Mm-hmm. Because what it also means, Regina, is taking on a new level of humility as the mentee, mm-hmm. to recognize I'm good. I can absolutely be better. I don't know as much as I think I do. And I don't even know what I don't know. And in some cases, what I think I'm good at, I'm actually not that good at.
Right. And being willing to, open to receiving that.
100%. Yeah.
Because that's hard.
That's real hard. When your mentor is like, yeah, that's not your best look.
Right.
And you're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah. I had a mentor tell me, and you played that all wrong. Mm-hmm. Because you were thinking about this moment, you weren't thinking about long term. Mm-hmm. And, I was mad. I was hot. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, as we went down, he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I had to really work to be able to receive that, because that was hard. And it was almost like a matter of integrity for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I was right. I know I did right.
That also brings to mind this idea of multiple mentors. Mm-hmm. I actually have multiple mentors.
Absolutely.
So when you think about this idea of matching and people being able to say, I can help you with this, or I can't help you with that, I think, having multiple mentors can be a really beautiful thing. I have a mentor that just helps me with relationship building, and he is masterful at it. Mm. When I tell you masterful, I mean, there are other things that he does, really helps me kind of think through some things, look ahead with a very positive view. He's constantly asking me, like, well, what are you working on now? Right. And it's pushing me to be even more forward thinking. My communication and being able to communicate in that symbolic frame. Right. So helping people see a vision, but using symbolism, like that kind of stuff. Right. Communicating that strongly in my writing. Thinking back and reflecting on where my team is and what kind of moves I need to make. You know what I'm mm-hmm. saying? Mm-hmm. And then showing me a whole other community of high level leadership and invested people that I didn't even know existed. Mm-hmm. So now I've got something to aspire to.
Right.
like, oh snap, these people are real.
Right.
And they're amazing. Like, I can get to this level. Yes. Okay. Talk to me about how. Right. So having and different genders. I've got male mentors. I've got female mentors. I've got Black mentors. I have white mentors. I'm wanting to expand that even further, right? Because everybody's got a unique walk and a unique perspective and something valuable that only they can bring.
Now, see, it's really interesting how you segmented your mentors. I segmented mine very differently. And I think there's some value in thinking about what you need. So my mentors, I had someone who's inside the organization. Because I need somebody who understands exactly what's happening in this political climate. I have somebody who's not in the organization, but is in the general realm of the world that I'm in. And then I have somebody who's not in this at all, right? Because now I get an objective perspective and possibly a different way of thinking about things that I wouldn't get this close inside.
Yes.
Right? So I think that also brings up a really important part of understanding what you need in a mentor.
Yes.
Because I'm going to go back to what organizations can do, but as we're talking about individuals, get a mentor. Everybody, I believe, should have one. Have several. But you need to know what you need in a mentor and what you're looking for. Because again, I think it's a two-way street, right? Do you have the skill set and the perspective that I need in my growth journey? And then as the mentor, am I ready to receive the information that you're going to give? And can you provide it in a way that's actually going to lead to growth for me?
Yeah. And systematically as an organization, we can also start to front load that conversation, right? Because if we're in a conversation where we're imagining what a mentorship system, program, whatever structure might look like within the organization, we can start to talk about on the front end, what are some of the base level things that have to be in place, right? To then begin to attract the right mentors for then, the ultimate pair up support, whatever that's going to be. So I think there's value in even tapping the perspective within the organization, because folks who have moved through that can reflectively talk about, here's what I would have loved to have, or what I have started to try and give to others because I recognize there's a need for that. Here's, generally speaking, based on what we know about how we do what we do, here's what people are going to need. Here's what people who identify like this, fresh out of college, first job ever, you know what I mean? Like, this is what, this group of folks are going to want to need. And then still leaving room for the people who will be the recipients of mentorship to also have voice.
Right. Well, my first job was in banking, and we had a structured mentor program, which I initially thought was really weird because it was a group mentorship program. It was somebody I wouldn't have picked to be my mentor at all. But that actually wound up being one of the best things because it wasn't somebody who I would have picked, who wound up seeing some very different things than I would have even asked to hear, right? And it was in a group setting where we got to sort of bounce a few things off of each other. And she was also very much an advocate for us finding another mentor. She's like, I'm here to deliver some very specific things that we as a bank are looking for, right? We think you have the ability to go far in our organization. We want you to be a part of this. And so I want to make sure that you got those foundational things. But you also are going to be aware of the things that you need, and you need to find other mentors in the organization. And so I think that most times people think about mentorship and certainly sponsorship as something that individuals should do on their own. But there is a place where employers can say, hey, these are some people with talent. these are some people who we think can have the ability to move up in the organization, and provide mentors for them to get those foundational things that you were referring to. Make sure that they have that, make sure that they're aware of those, and then also get some more.
Yeah, I think that's just right. I mean, I've spent over 20 years in education. I mean, I do leadership development work in government, nonprofit, for-profit industries now, but my background is in education. And one of the things that's true in the kindergarten through 12th grade education space is that new teachers get mentored. It is baked into the program by and large. So, if this is your first year teaching and you've now joined the faculty or the staff of a school, there is a mentor either on staff or hired from an outside organization to come in to help you do what? Bridge the gap from wherever you were before you became a teacher to, real life in the classroom. That's the one who's going to tell you, yep, I know you learned that in your methods class, but it's out the window by day 3.
Right. That's not going to work in real life.
Not going to work in real life. Here's what needs to happen, right? And it's not the stumble and stumble blind and find your way approach. Because in this climate, again, we're laying down, we're dealing with, maybe not laying down, but we're dealing with mounds of emotional and spiritual and mental weights that many of us are not used to carrying, right? Or managing. And so if we're really talking about setting people up for success, if you think about it, right, you see a pregnant woman walking down the street carrying 9 bags. You rush to help her. Please, let me help you, give you some relief.
Right.
Let me help. I know how to carry bags. I can carry some of these bags for you, because that is a much better entry point for conversation than walking alongside her and talking about her soon to be experience as a mother. She's carrying 10 bags.
Right. That's where the focus is.
Hello?
I don't have the energy to think about this impending motherhood.
Think about the future.
Right.
What are you talking about? I'm
got
just
these
trying
bags
to
right
get
now.
to the corner here.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think one of the potential obstacles, I would say, not insurmountable, but something we have to think about, is even training our mentors, whether it's in an organizational setting, a more individualized setting, not to project your own pain points, foul ups, experiences, whatever, onto your mentee as gospel, right? Because just like a mentee has to be ready to receive that mentorship and be in a place mentally, your heart space, your mind space, where you're like, this is actually what I need. I need to learn. I need to grow. And I can't do it by myself.
Right.
I need somebody who knows something more than me. The mentor also has to be in a place where they can say, like you were mentioning, I know these things. We can go hard in the paint on these things. This over here, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know a lot about that. Or I had a bad experience here. I'm actually still kind of working through that. I don't want to transfer that to you. Right. But I know someone else, Regina down the hall,
And she's great with that.
Let me introduce you to her. Yeah.
And that is really important, because I think sometimes we're reluctant, especially in positions of leadership, to say, that's not my lane, because all the lanes are supposed to be your lanes at certain levels of leadership, right? or
supposedly
we're like, that's not
It's not
realistic.
true, but
it's
okay.
not realistic at all.
It's not true, but okay.
And I don't even know that people really have that expectation, but for some reason we believe that they do. So we want to project that I've got it all under control. I know all the things and I can handle everything. Right. And so letting that go.
Yeah.
But I think it's also really saying that, you know what? I really had some really bad experiences with this, and I'm not going to be able to give you the best advice that isn't tainted by my own personal trauma with it.
That's right.
And so recognizing, and I'm happy to let you know what that is, but this isn't the place where I can advise you. And
That's
I think
right.
understanding there's a difference between sharing
Yes.
and advising, because
Yes.
it probably is helpful to share what happened,
100%.
but you may not be in the space to advise on how to handle that aspect.
That's right. That's right. I'm something that's been bubbling in my spirit the whole time we've been talking, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it. Don't worry, it's nothing crazy. But I think one of the pieces in this conversation that about mentorship and sponsorship and why it's important for diverse candidates, for people of color, is that, so I'll say something and I'll try to qualify it. By and large, people of color in a professional setting are navigating spaces that weren't designed for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about what a docent is in a museum that you've never been to,
Mm-hmm.
for you as a guest, it's the person who's responsible for making sure that you comfortably move through that facility, seeing the different exhibits, knowing where the restrooms are, having a place to sit, grabbing a snack if you need, you know what I mean? That you have a comfortable experience and that you have somebody who's ensuring that, right? When we think about this notion of the workplace, I think a lot of times folks can forget that these spaces were not actually designed, even schools
Mm-hmm.
were not designed with the success of people of color in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means there are lots of things that are absent from the environment that are essential for the success of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who understand what it means to walk in these spaces and be successful as a person of color have a unique perspective that can be shared with a potential mentee about how to move, how to think, how to relate, whatever that is. Not like controlling how to think, you know what I mean? But just even how to process, start to process what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and can help the mentee name things that they may be experiencing that they don't even have language for yet because it's just so new. I remember as a classroom teacher, I became very vigilant about ensuring that my Black male students were having a successful run, right, in school. I taught middle school for a number of years. And I remember one day, I remember when this was crystallized for me, that this is something I need to commit to. And we were a 6th and 7th grade team. There were 4 teachers, right, on the team. And our students were having, middle school trouble at recess, right? Ain't nothing major.
I'm very familiar with
middle
that.
school trouble at recess.
5th and 6th grade.
There
I
you
didn't
go.
know it
Okay.
well.
So as teachers, we recognized it and we're like, okay, we need to address it. But what we noticed was that the girls were having different issues than the boys, which require some conversation with everybody, but then separate conversations to address these issues. So we said, all right, let's separate the girls and the boys. And I remember one of my colleagues who I loved dearly, we said, all right, let's separate the girls and the boys. And then the question was, all right, who's going to talk to the boys? Who's going to talk to the girls? Because there are 4 of us. And she blurted out, like, with fervor, with vigor. I don't even know the right word. Like, there was like such strong energy behind it. I'm not going in there with all those boys. These were her students that she taught every day. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I was shocked. I said, well, what, like, why not? What do you mean? And she's like, there's no way I'm going in there with all those boys. Wow. And outright refused to go. So I went to my mother's house, who's one of my mentors. That day, my parents' house. My dad is now deceased, though. But I went to my parents' house and literally boohoo cried and told my mother the story. And I said, Mom, I didn't know. Like, I legit didn't know. I had read about it. I had seen the research on it. But I had never gotten that up close to it, right? To see that there was something in the environment actually being carried by other people that was contributing to the experience that this group of children was having at school.
Right.
And if we think about this notion that these workspaces were not designed with the success of people of color, of diverse people in mind, it could also mean potentially that these invisible things in some cases, like maybe held in something else, held in a structure that we take for granted, held in a system that we think, well, this is just what makes the organization run, held in a way that we organize our work and organize ourselves. And so I think it just invites deeper conversation and critical reflection to really look at how we do the work that we do and ask ourselves the tough questions. Yeah, we could put a mentorship program in place, but have we created the environment for these beautiful people to come in, all the people we bring in to come in and actually be set up for success?
Well, it's so funny. You were talking about that bubbling up in your spirit. I was like, oh, we've got the same thing going. Because I was thinking about Minda Hart's book, The Memo, right? And if you have not read it, it is, I think, a must read, particularly for young people of color who are coming up in corporate America.
Okay.
And particularly women. And so she said there are all of these aspects to the corporate game that I didn't know. She said, so I didn't know that I needed to go to the corporate picnic or the corporate happy hour after work, but I've got 2 jobs and I've got to take care of my mother and I have all these other obligations, and that seemed like extra to me.
Right.
But that was the place where you were having drinks with the person who was becoming the sponsor and they got to know you.
That's right.
And so when they were talking to the CEO, his name came up, but not yours, even though you were doing better work than he was.
Right.
Right. And so we talk about spaces that weren't designed for the success of people of color. There are also rules to the game that a lot of people of color are unaware of.
Because we didn't write the rules.
We didn't write the rules. And they aren't just shared with people.
Yeah, well, they are. But if you think about where the sharing happens, it happens in communal spaces. So in this country, we live pretty segregated lives by and large, right? We worship with people who look like us. We live with people who, and some of this was engineered, right? A lot of this was engineered, right? But whatever. So if you think about where those conversations happen, or family reunion, or, you know what I mean? Like these places with people, who are also in that space, who can say, hey, this is how it happens, or who even mimic it in your smaller environment.
Right.
So you've got exposure. You know what it looks like. Oh, this is the same thing that happens every time Uncle Tony brings over 5 friends who,
And then they introduce me
and I've got
they suggest we go play golf.
They're teaching me how to exactly. But if these people you're close to have also been systematically shut out of these spaces. Who has seen this?
Right.
To then be able to tell you this is what it looks like and help you practice what to do. So when you step into these spaces, it is, you've got muscle memory.
Right.
That's the thing that I think a lot of people of color lack, to your point, in these higher level corporate spaces, is muscle memory. Because we didn't write the rules. We didn't get the rule book. We didn't know anybody who had the rule book. When we finally got the rule book, we couldn't read the rule book.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like all these
Right.
things.
All these
We didn't
things.
have, we wanted to ask questions to decipher stuff that was in the rule book. And it's not to say that we're incompetent or incapable, because, every human being is extraordinary. That's my own personal belief. But access is access.
Sure. I mean, and it's like if you're sitting down at a board, it's a big difference if you're playing checkers or if you're playing chess.
Oh my.
Same board. But you have to understand the rules of the game. And it's not to say that you couldn't learn the rules.
Yes.
But they are two very different games, even though they're played on the same board.
Yes.
Right. And having to understand that nuance. And I think, so as we talk about, yes, sponsorship, mentorship and sponsorship are important for everyone, but they are particularly important for employees of color for these reasons.
Yeah. People will be what they see.
All right. So I know we've been talking for a while and this has been phenomenal. It's been great. I've loved it. But we've discussed a lot of stuff. So
we've gone all over.
We really have. So I'm not going to give you
an easy assignment. Have I been a good guest?
You've been fantastic. I want to give people as much information as possible.
Reel me back in.
But if you had one big takeaway for people and for employers, we've covered quite the range. But if you was like the one important thing that I really want you to hold on to, what would that be?
Concerning mentorship and sponsorship?
Yes.
I would say it's not important, it's essential. So if you're committed, it's not important, it's essential. And the greatest way to ensure sustained success is to have a diverse team, diverse in every way you would define diversity. So then, if you're truly committed to the success of your organization, mentorship and sponsorship is just kind of what you're going to do, right? It makes the commitment that much easier. So it's essential, and it has to be intentional because there's nothing organic about it at an organizational systems level.
Right.
Not in a sustainable fashion. And I would say the third sentence in this closing statement is, if you really don't believe that you need diverse leadership, it's already showing in how you move in your organization, whether you realize it or not.
Right. And will be one of the main reasons you won't have it.
Will be the main reason you don't have it. Yeah.
I think for me, it's the fact that because sponsorship and mentorship is essential, you have to, as an employer, create space for it. And that can be a structured program. That can be talking to your leaders about serving as mentors and sponsors. That can be encouraging new employees to find a mentor or a sponsor. Whatever the situation is, it has to, again, going back to that intentionality, but you have to create space for it and not just assume that it's going to happen organically or put it on the responsibility of the employees, even though they have some. You also have to create that because that's going to get you that leadership development and cultivation in the way that you need to move people through the ranks of your organization.
100%. And if you really believe that's what you need at the leadership level, you will invest in all of those things.
Yeah.
You will.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rebecca, it has been such a pleasure talking with you. This has been just a fantastic conversation, and I think a really important one that doesn't get talked about enough.
I would agree. I feel very fortunate to have had this opportunity just to chat with you. I'm leaving with my own takeaways. That woman that I met with for lunch, that young professional, she had homework, and one of her homework assignments was to actually create her mentor avatar. Who do you want? What do you need? Who do you want them to be? And so we've got work to do moving from there. And I'm taking so much of this conversation with me, even for that. So I'm grateful.
And you've really given me a lot as well. And I'm really going to think about like the differences and sort of like a skill-based assessment of mentorship, because I think maybe I need to move to that now.
Listen, let me know, because I'm willing to loan my mentors out. They're great.
I really like that.
Really great.
So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Business of Race podcast. Please follow us on all the social media platforms and click the subscribe button so that you'll be notified of new content every time we put it up. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week in the conference room.